So yes, we are the final speech, and I can imagine that everybody's head is full of information after such a full day. So please bear with us. We're both Irish, which means you have a tendency to talk on, but we'll try and keep it snappy and to the point. So a quick introduction to myself. My name is Yvonne Mullins. I'm the Managing Director of Prime for Services Switzerland, and also work as a Senior MES consultant for our client projects. Today joining me virtually is Alan, and I'll come back to you shortly, Alan. I would just like to give a little bit of a background into how our working relationship started between Takeda and Prime for Services, and then we come back to you. So back in late 2018, Takeda Singen in Germany contracted us, Prime for Services, in to run an MES assessment for an already started MES project, and this MES project was part of their digital factory for their newly being built at the time dengue vaccine facility there at Singen in Germany. And since then, actually to date, we've continued our services with Takeda, and in fact they've basically used most of the services you see here on the profile on the right hand side, from when we started the initial assessment to the feasibility output that came from that assessment. We then continued on supporting them through all the CSV activities with the MES rollout, provided project management services, and Takeda Singen was a very interesting project because it was a fully integrated model. So complete integration from the equipment layer right up to SAP, and we provided the integration lead and support there also with those services. So we did that throughout the project lifecycle, from the very start, as mentioned, with the assessment, right through to the go-live and the post-go-live operational support. So, Alan, maybe you can give us an introduction to yourself and in particular your role with regard to the digital factory there at Takeda Singen.
Yeah, this is Digital Alan. I'm sorry I can't be there with you in Berlin, everyone. So yeah, hello everyone. So my name is Alan Kelly. I'm the head of vaccines for global engineering in Takeda. So my role is primarily, as Yvonne mentioned, the project lead for the Singen vaccines facility that we're building here in Germany. So I've 20 years experience in the industry, and it's been an interesting 20 years working in both Ireland and Germany. My first MES project would have been back in 2002, so I guess I've seen it from the very start when MES projects were starting, and how the industry has moved on to where we are now is quite interesting. And I just picked up on some of the conversation there in the last session about running a plant from a phone. I honestly don't think we're that far from it either, so for a very interesting conversation. So yeah, we're building a digital factory here in Singen. I should mention it's the dengue vaccine candidate, because the vaccine isn't quite approved just yet, so just to get the terminology right. So it has been a fully integrated, vertically integrated plant, as Yvonne mentioned. A very interesting journey for the team. So yeah, looking forward to discussing this over the next 20-25 minutes.
Thanks, Alan. So as you can see on the slide, the topic is about the human factor behind digitalization. So typically when we're talking about digital programs, we have a tendency to talk about the systems and the processes and how they interact and how they communicate. What about the people who are impacted and the issues or the opportunities and the benefits that come as a part of the whole digitalization journey? And in particular, we want to just focus in on just some areas. For example, here what we're showing is the common pitfalls or issues we see related to the people behind digitalization. What we've heard a lot today is around change management, and we would just look at this in regards to that Takeda Singen, and if there was elements of resistance to that change, how that was managed. And we see more and more local MES implementations being replaced or integrated under the more global MES templates managed by global MES teams. So we look at that and the impact it has on the people involved. And then finally, using the Takeda Singen Digital Factory case study, Alan will share with us some of the valuable lessons learned and best practices that came as a result of that whole rollout. So looking at the first item, the common pitfalls or issues that we would see regarding the people behind digital transformation projects. So nice diagram here. I think we all have seen this probably once or twice going past roadworks, but there can be these elements within such digitalization projects like the single source of failure. So who are these people? They are the go-to person that everybody goes to. The person who has got this immense knowledge and experience with systems. So then one of you or many of you could be these single sources that people go to. But then what typically happens is when you've got your digital projects being rolled out, they're also the ones that people will pull into these projects. So the limited capacity they already had because they were a single source for everything else now means they've even a further reduced capacity. And this can really have an impact on the project and also the project team because they become a bit of a bottleneck. Work silos. So we know with digital transformation, it really cuts across all different areas of the organization. So from your supply chain to production to IT. But what can happen then when you're actually going through the project is that these areas remain working quite independently. They have conflicting agendas, conflicting priorities, and can be lacking this management throughout the project that kind of brings them, integrates them together and manages them to the end and guides them through that project. And then we have this lovely big bangs that we see more and more happening, SAP and MES projects going in parallel and also usually within a quite limited time period. And this can really have consequences for your capacity issues on site. And these then, in turn, will cause issues for the project and create a very high risk profile for the project's success ultimately. So, Alan, your experiences or your insights from the digital factory rollout there at Takeda, can you give us some of your insights or experiences that may be touching on some of these issues experienced?
Yeah, maybe just to paint the scene, first of all, I mean, we use the term digital factory, and for me, I always view that as an aspiration. It's a vision, and that's something that we developed very, very early in the project here. So just to set the scene here in Singen, we built the two vaccines facilities behind me. One is a drug product manufacturing facility, and the second one is a drug substance facility, and we're building that on an existing Takeda plant. Part of the challenge that we're to do is not only to build a plant that was effectively a digital plant, we also had to transfer a lot of our operators from the existing facility into the new facility. This facility is now 40 years in existence. So even the age profile and the people that were moving into the facility hadn't worked in this type of facility before. So not only were we facing the challenge of understanding what it meant to build a digital factory, and that's been a learning journey for all of us, there was a huge challenge for us to upskill and build the capability of the organization to drive this project. I give one example, and it's been fun for me because not only am I learning how to build a plant like this, but also learning German. So we used to meet the operators and we talked to them about their challenges and coming to the facility. And they'd heard about, oh, this is going to be a digital plant. We had one operator as an example who'd spent 15 years in the plant and had never operated a laptop. And I think that's something that often I've heard the four speakers beforehand, very, very energized people who are the early adopters to this technology who are driving the industry forward. We cannot forget that we have to bring the rest of the organizations with us. These people who are resistant to change maybe, but maybe there's a reason behind that resistance to change. So that focus on organization capability, we also used to go back to that person, okay, can that person now run this type of plant? The other thing you mentioned about, we have vertically integrated the plant. So, for example, when we're manufacturing a packaging lot or a manufacturing lot of the facility, the order comes straight down from our ERP system right through into our machines. And what we realized very, very quickly is, not only are the systems speaking to each other, independent functions who could operate independently 15, 20 years ago are now interfacing together. So your old IT team with your automation team, right down to your automation team who are helping their lines, running the lines, your PLCs, your SCADA systems, etc. So their mode of working is fundamentally changing. It is constantly changing. So you have to really understand how are these teams working together, and they're working together at a level that they've never done so in the past. And I think as leaders in plants, when you're running these types of projects, you have to be very, very cognizant of that and aware of that throughout the life cycle of the project. So these working silos, they don't really exist anymore. So that's something you have to the fore and to your mind.
Yeah. And I think one of the interesting things from our experience, and it's probably close to my heart, but from our experience in particular working with Takeda Zingin, and we don't always have that nice experience, is that you can have this external versus internal culture. So the vendor is brought in specifically on the request of the client to help the local project team. But then if that culture is there, if that divide is there, we can often be left out of certain discussions in areas that then ultimately realize further down the line in the project into issues or gaps, because we would have been able to add value back then that gap continued on. So thankfully it was not the case at Takeda Zingin, but can you maybe give us insight, how did Takeda cultivate that sort of working environment that such a divide doesn't exist there?
Yeah, and I'm going to share a funny story here. And but one of the things in the job description when I come onto this role 3 or 4 years ago was to build a digital plant. And I remember having some conversations with senior management. Okay, what does that mean? And it's very much, we have to figure that out ourselves. And one of the things we realized very, very early in the project is, look, we cannot do this ourselves. And really the importance of building that digital ecosystem, whether it was your systems or your partners and collaborators, was really, really important. And we developed the project team values and what we wanted to aspire to be as a team. One of the values was actually to be the best collaborators and partners in Takeda. And we set that down. We had 4 team values, and one of them was to be the best collaborators and partners, because we realized to deliver on our digital aspiration, we had to have that external expertise, whether within Takeda, with partners in Takeda, or with partners like yourselves, Prime for Services. Yeah. And this is not just the MES example. There's two or three other projects where we are putting in machine learning and artificial intelligence. To give an example, we've an automated inspection line, and we're partnering with the supplier and with MIT in Boston to develop a machine learning algorithm where the machine teaches itself to improve the inspection levels of our files coming off our line. So of course we could not do that ourselves. So it's about building that culture in the team of, okay, how do we leverage external support to deliver on the digital aspiration? And we try to build that into everyone that comes in the plant to have that attitude when they come working here to see that project.
Thanks, Alan. I think you already kind of briefly touched on it, Alan, and we all know change management is a big factor with transformation, and it's in the name itself, transformation. So people's jobs transform completely and cuts across all of the different levels of skill sets, from your operator on the shop floor to your ERP expert. So, I mean, I think you did talk about it, touched on it, but is there, more specific approaches that you took from the Takeda side that really helped that whole change management process? And
yeah, it was interesting. I was listening to the previous speakers about quality and maybe resistance to change there. But I think like with anything with change management, in terms of resistance, you must understand that resistance is an emotive response. Okay, you're seeing the tip of the iceberg. You have to understand deeper, why is that resistance there? And it could be fear of the unknown. It might be lack of capability. What I call is maybe not seeing beyond the first principles of an MES EBR solution. Just to go back to what the previous panel were speaking about, running a plant on your phone. I think from first principles, you see, okay, you move from a paper batch record onto a digital batch record, but that's only the first possibility you get from implementing these systems. What you can get from data analytics from your plant, go well beyond just digitalizing your batch record. I mean, you can effectively run a plant from a phone. I don't think we're that far from that at all. So I think that resistance to change, you have to understand deep down what's causing that. And the other thing I want to mention, just going back to the quality aspect of this, one thing that has been a latent benefit, and this has been a learning for me as well, is, I don't see the resistance to quality. Quality has to be brought in from the very, very start. You have to build that quality culture into everything you do, because it's our license to operate. And one of the big learnings we've had is actually implementing projects like this. They promote your quality culture, because really there is no way around it. If you look at a batch record and packaging, which is completely automated, you must do it the way it's intended to be done. So you take out that human error element that was there in the past. So again, just going back to the resistance to change is understanding why is that resistance there, and then trying to use that understanding to bring the people forward.
Yeah.
I think that's it's too simple to just say it's resistance to change. You have to understand it.
Yeah.
It's a bit deeper than that.
Yeah, and at Takeda, Alan always had a famous quote, a speak up culture, but I think that was really something that you were very passionate about and made sure that people weren't silent if other resistance to change was happening, that they would speak up and talk about the impact of it. But what we see more and more is the local MES implementations are being replaced by global MES rollout programs and templates, which are managed by a global MES team. And it was definitely a case at Takeda, and even a bit of a more special case, because in 2018, when it had started, it was completely local project team, local implementation, local business requirements. And then mid-project, in the subsequent phases of the project implementation, the global MES template was established and the new global MES team was formed and established. And as a consequence of this, the Takeda Zingen local then had to be incorporated into this global setup. I mean, that was an interesting case to even as an external vendor to look at, but how did you see that evolution process, that evolving from local to global, and how does it look today now with that global template and global MES team in place?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think in some ways we were lucky to a degree, in that this was very much a phased build. So in terms of building the facility, it is for a vaccine that is in the process of approval. So our primary goal as a project team was to get our packaging all approved for the initial filing of the vaccine candidate. And then we brought the learnings from that into the next phase of the project, which was for the drug product manufacturing. So that in itself was a key benefit for us when we look at how we implemented it as a local project. So going back to what you were talking about, Yvonne, we did start as a local project, and now as we're leveraging what we've learned from the Tasiva experience and some other MES projects in Takeda, and now we've got a global template and a global team in place to roll out it to the rest of the 30 facilities we have across the globe. I think, and again, it's different for different manufacturing companies, for different pharma companies. It's different models, suit different setups in terms of the operating model of those companies. And there's pros and cons to both models. I mean, when you have a local rollout, you have a lot of the process knowledge there. You can develop the capability locally, but with that comes the challenging of resourcing a local project. But you do have that tacit process knowledge, which is so important to running a facility like that. Notwithstanding that you lose the benefits of a global team. So the power that a global team can bring in terms of resources. If you've qualification done on templates or on your MES application, which are done at a global level, you can leverage those capabilities and those things that can be done by a global team. Yeah. But of course, there's negatives to that as well, because if a global team is rolling out to 3 or 4 sites, the attention that you need on the one side, it can be a fight for the other sites. Yeah. So there's pros and cons to both models, and you have to take a step back and really understand what's the model that fits for what we need in our company.
Yeah. And what we show here on the third bullet point, this capability-enabled model, so it's something myself and my colleague 2 years ago stood up in the stage next door and presented as a model that Prime for Services definitely recommends to our clients. And what we mean here is that the local resources are utilized by the global team, so they're incorporated into the global team. And it's a really win-win situation because the expertise has been built up in that local site. It's very hard to find that expertise on the market. The global team can utilize that, and the local team has a stronger voice then and an influence in that whole global rollout and implementation. And I know we saw that at Takeda happening, that capability-enabled model was done.
It's interesting. It's I keep using the term learning journey, right? And probably fed up saying this over the last 2 to 3 years of the project, but just what you speak about, the capability building that your team and your organization go through is really, really important. And even when we look at our inspection readiness, to be very, very open, 2 or 3 years ago when we went through the packaging inspections and then the pre-inspections with global auditing teams from Takeda, the one thing that kept me awake at night was always the readiness of our MES team, the readiness of our team to defend the approach we took. We always knew we had the right quality culture, but could we explain this, from an inspection point of view? I don't have that worry anymore. If I look at how the team and the people have developed, the product that we've put into place for our facility, I see this now as a competitive advantage, that we have a team that have built the capability, can go in and understand what we have done, not only understand it, but challenge how we can do better in terms of the next improvements for our processes. So that capability has been building. It's really has to be the cornerstone of your project.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, Yvonne, we now have people who've now moved into the global team who are supporting the global rollout from the facility. So that's a great opportunity for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a win-win situation. So, in summary, and for sure there's no one solution that fits all, but Alan, if you had to go back in time to before your setting up of the digital factory, or however the definition of the digitalization at Takeda Zingen was, so if you had to go back to that time, what are the things you might have done differently, or what have you learned over the last few years with this whole implementation? Yeah,
I think I got to reflect on what the panel were talking about a moment ago. The whole industry is turning. The whole world is changing in terms of digital transformation, and I find it fascinating. But I think you have to go into these projects with a very, very open mind. Stay focused on the end product. I go back to that operator I mentioned about spending 15 years in the plant and never operating an MES terminal or a laptop in their lives. I think you absolutely have to stay focused on the end customer experience or the end user experience, not just for an MES project, but for any type of digital project that you're implementing at the plant. I think the focus on single points of failure, I think you touched on it earlier on, Yvonne, that the focus on the right resource planning early on. Probably if I had my time back, we would have done things certainly differently there. Because it's a challenge we certainly faced over the course of the project, where we had built this expertise, but it was a single point of failure. So having that redundancy in your project team or in your operations, so that you don't have that risk as an ongoing operation. And the one thing I think I go back to, quality is our license to operate. From the very, very start, you have to operate with that quality mindset, whether you're an automation person, IT operations, no matter what, knowing that quality is your license to operate in this industry. And if you have that mindset, then you get rid of that risk that could be inherent in your project otherwise. So they're just a couple of things I reflect on a lot, and I could probably talk for another hour on that. But they're the things that kind of come to my mind as you ask the question.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Alan. So, yeah, I think we're done with the topic for now. So I guess myself and Alan are open for any questions from the audience, if there is any. Did he just disappear?
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Thank you very much, Alan, for the interesting insights and also the cultural change on the cultural impact that such projects have. Any questions? I know it's late, but you still have time for questions. Anything that you would like to know? I have one question for you.
You always have to be prepared for one in case the other people don't ask.
That's my job. I understand, and maybe I missed that. Sorry for that then. But how you facilitate to, let's say, educate the people, train them up, manage the change and everything. Did you implement something, because this is part of a global rollout? That's what I understood. So this is not only Singen, And it's not only Singen versus the Global Competence Center. So there are other sites and there are learnings from other sites as well as you're moving along the global rollout. So you're going from one facility, maybe also doing some of them in parallel, but I mean, you're going from one site to the next site and so on and so forth. I mean, are there any measures that you put in place in order to capture experiences, pitfalls, as you mentioned in one of the slides, best practices, in order to convey that from one side to the next side and being also a best practice for the global program? Is there anything that was put in place?
It's a good, yeah, I'll let Alan take it.
Yeah, I can probably answer that because that's probably an organization question for us. So I would say over the course of the project, we have implemented that now, but initially, no. Okay, and I guess that is a sign of the maturity of the organization that we've built this. So I can give some very, very specific examples. Obviously, we have plants in Ireland, so I would have a connection with them. So it goes back to that point about being good collaborators and partners. So I would say early on in the project, we had to teach our people about how to be networking, you know, with internally in Takeda, but also externally. How do you leverage learnings from other sites or from outside of the organization, even using our partners, P4S, you know, what's their understanding and how we can leverage that. So we did have, I would say, site-to-site engagements. So we have another site in Germany, just north of Berlin, where you are, where we did have these informal networking at the very, very start of the project. But how that's developed now is, you know, we now have that global team in place. So we do have community of practices set up. We're looking at those global templates and having the local SMEs connected across the organization network, across our manufacturing network. So it's far more formal than it was in the past. And I think that's a journey that we continue to improve and foster as we roll out the MES projects and the other plans.
Yeah, but I think you do.
And I think
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, the other thing as well is that, and I go back to that second, third principle benefit of these types of projects. You know, one thing is your master batch record, but I'm always, for me as a plant operations lead, is how can we use that to develop the control tower concept for the plant? So what other sites are doing around data analytics and digital? So we do have a control tower concept for how we run the plant. We have 2 big screens here on level 3. I want to see the real-time performance of the plant right in front of me so I can talk to the leadership team every single day at 10 o'clock about where's the plant and where do we need to be tomorrow at 10 o'clock. That's the vision. Yeah.
All right.
And how are other sites doing that? I'm always interested. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I think we both agree with Takeda, which wasn't a perfect situation at all, is the knowledge transfer from the external, from the vendor to the internal team, because there was the capacity issue with the local team. So that training up and upskilling of those people was probably a bit far too late and should have been done much earlier on in the project cycle. Yeah.
All right. No, I mean, very interesting insights. So thank you very much,
Thank you.
Yvonne. Thank you very much, Alan.
Thanks,
Thank you for
Alan.
having you here.
Thank you, everybody.